The evening sky over Talus III burned with colors that Hayrin had loved since childhood. Purple clouds drifted across 3 moons while the colony's lights began to glow in the gathering darkness. She stood in the teaching garden with 20 younglings seated around her, their large eyes reflecting the stars that were just becoming visible. "Teacher Hayrin, which star is the homeworld?" asked one of the smallest ones, pointing upward with a delicate finger. Hayrin smiled and guided the youngling's hand toward a bright point in the western sky. "That one. Our ancestors left from there 3 generations ago to build this place. They wanted us to have room to grow, space to breathe, land to farm. The Naveen people had never been warriors. Their entire history spoke of art, farming, philosophy, and peace. Talus III was their dream made real. Rolling fields of grain, orchards heavy with fruit, and small towns connected by gentle roads. No walls, no weapons, no soldiers. Just families building a quiet life under alien stars. The alarm changed everything. A sound like tearing metal shrieked across the colony. Hayrin's communication device buzzed violently against her wrist. The younglings jumped to their feet, their ears flat against their heads in fear. Above them, the peaceful sky suddenly filled with streaks of fire as the orbital defense platforms died. "Everyone inside," Hayrin shouted, her voice cracking. She had never shouted before. "Run to the shelter, now!" The younglings scattered toward the teaching hall while Hayrin looked up. Massive shapes were dropping out of the darkness between the stars. Ships, warships, the kind she had only seen in historical records, about the violent species that lived near the galactic core. Her device buzzed again. The colony administrator's voice came through, tight with panic. "All civilians to emergency shelters. This is not a drill. Hostile fleet in orbit. Crash Dominion raiders. Get underground immediately." Hayrin's blood turned cold. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Kresh. They were slavers, raiders who swept down on peaceful worlds and took everything. People, resources, technology. They left nothing behind but empty buildings and broken families. She ran after the younglings, herding them down the stairs into the underground shelter. Other teachers and parents were already there, their faces pale with terror. The shelter was designed for storms and accidents, not for war. The walls were simple concrete. The door was just metal. It would not stop trained soldiers. Above them, the sounds of destruction grew louder. Explosions shook dust from the ceiling. Someone's device was streaming the newsfeed. Hayrin watched in horror as camera drones showed the colony's 3 orbital stations exploding in brilliant flashes. The planetary defense grid, built to push away asteroids, fired uselessly at the Kresh warships. Energy shields absorbed every shot. "We sent the distress signal," someone said. "The homeworld will send help." "The homeworld is 2 weeks away," another voice answered. "We have hours at most." Hayrin pulled the younglings close and tried to speak calmly, though her hearts were racing. "It will be fine. The adults will keep you safe. Just stay quiet and stay together." But she did not believe her own words. No one was coming. No one could come in time. 3 systems away, Governor Sang-Ho sat in his office at the human trading post and listened to the distress call for the 5th time. The Naveen colony administrator's voice was breaking with fear as he described the Kresh fleet tearing through their defenses. Sang-Ho was a diplomat, not a soldier, but he understood military timelines. He pulled up the tactical map on his desk display. The Naveen military forces were marked in blue, currently conducting exercises near their homeworld. 2 weeks away at best speed, the Galactic Council had peacekeeping ships scattered across 6 nearby systems, but they would need 3 days just to gather a fleet and get authorization to move. The colony had 6 hours. Maybe 8 if they were lucky. He opened the communication channel to every military asset within range. The list was short, depressingly short. Most species kept their warships close to home. The frontier regions were considered peaceful enough to not need heavy military presence. Then he saw it. 1 ship 4 systems away, a human vessel. Sang-Ho activated the emergency line. The response came in seconds. A woman's face appeared on his screen, her dark eyes alert despite the late hour. "This is Admiral Yuna, 5th Fleet Command." "What's the emergency, Governor?" "Kresh raiders attacking the Naveen colony on Talus 3. 12 warships, maybe more. They have hours at most. I need whatever you have in range." Yuna's expression hardened. She turned away from the camera, speaking to someone off screen. When she turned back, her jaw was set. The Defiant Dawn is running patrol exercises 4 systems out. Captain Taman and crew, 1 battleship, 1 ship against 12. It's what we have. Yuna's fingers moved across her console. Governor, you understand what you're asking? A blind jump into a combat zone. No reconnaissance. No fleet support. No backup plan. Sang-Ho thought of the distress call. The fear in that administrator's voice. He thought of the Naveen people who he had met at trade conferences. Gentle farmers and artists who could not even imagine the violence heading toward them. Admiral, if we don't try, those colonists die. Every single one of them. Yuna was quiet for 3 seconds. Patching you through to the Defiant Dawn. This is Captain Taman's call. The screen changed. A man appeared, lean and sharp-eyed, his hair cut military short. Behind him, Sang-Ho could see the bridge of a warship, lit by the red glow of combat-ready status. This is Captain Taman. I heard the situation, Governor. Show me what we're facing. Sang-Ho transmitted everything. The Kresh fleet composition, the colony location, the timeline. Taman watched it all without expression, then turned to someone off camera. Commander G1, tactical assessment. A woman's voice responded, cold and professional. 12 confirmed Kresh warships, including 2 heavy cruisers. Unknown number of fighters and landing craft. We would be jumping in alone against a full raiding flotilla. Odds are very bad, Captain. But possible. Possible, yes. We would need to hit them before they organize a response. Maximum aggression from the first second. Accept damage to deliver damage. Taman looked back at Sang-Ho. Governor, give me 5 minutes to discuss this with my crew. The screen went dark. Sang-Ho sat in silence, his hands gripped together. 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. He imagined the Kresh ships moving into landing positions. He imagined soldiers dropping onto that peaceful world. The screen lit up again. Taman's face was calm, but his eyes were steel. We're going in. The Defiant Dawn will jump in 30 minutes. Tell the colony to hold on. Tell them help is coming. Captain, even if you win, your ship will do what it was built to do. Taman cut him off, not unkindly. Protect people who can't protect themselves. Defiant Dawn out. On Talos the 30, the situation grew worse by the minute. Kresh fighters screamed through the atmosphere, firing on anything that moved. The communication center exploded in a ball of flame. Power failed across half the colony. Hayron and the others huddled in darkness, listening to the sounds of landing craft descending. An elder Naveen tried to access the communication network, desperate for any news. The device crackled with static, then caught a fragment of a transmission. No response from Council Fleet. Authorization still pending. Earliest arrival 70 hours. 70 hours. They did not have 70 minutes. Hayron held the younglings as they cried quietly in the dark. She thought about her parents on the homeworld. Her sister who had just had a child. She would never see them again. None of them would. She activated her personal device and began recording a message. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed steady. Mother, Father, if you receive this, know that I loved you. Tell Bora that I was proud of her. Tell her daughter about the stars, her voice broke. Tell her about the beautiful stars. Outside, the Kresh soldiers were landing. Hayron could hear their weapons firing, hear their harsh voices shouting in a language she did not understand. The shelter door shook as something heavy moved past it. One of the adults whispered, Is anyone coming? Anyone at all? Hayron looked at the frightened faces around her. She opened her mouth to say something comforting, some reassuring lie. Then the sky above them lit up like a newborn sun, and the sound of human weapons tore through the darkness. The bridge of the Defiant Dawn hummed with controlled tension. Captain Taman stood at the center of the command platform, his eyes fixed on the tactical display floating before him. 12 red markers indicated the Kresh warships. 1 blue marker represented his ship. The numbers did not look good. Commander G1 moved beside him, her fingers dancing across her control panel. Final weapons check complete, Captain. All missile tubes loaded. Railguns charged. Point defense systems active. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Taman nodded. Around the bridge, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. These were not raw recruits. Every person here had chosen to serve on a frontier patrol ship, knowing they might face situations exactly like this. Alone, outnumbered, with no backup coming. Lieutenant Day, Taman called to his communications officer. Fleet-wide announcement. The young man nodded. All channels open, Captain. Taman took a breath. His voice carried to every section of the ship, every crew member at their station. This is the captain. You all know the situation. A peaceful colony is under attack by Kresh raiders. They have no defenses, no military, no way to protect themselves. The Kresh are there to take slaves and steal everything they can carry. He paused, letting that sink in. Command has authorized us to jump in and engage. This is voluntary. What we're about to do is dangerous. We might not make it back. We will be alone against a superior force. Anyone who wants to transfer to non-combat duties, do it now. No shame, no judgment. The bridge was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Taemin felt pride swell in his chest. Engineering, what's our jump time? 15 minutes to final calculations, Captain, came the response. We're pushing the drives hard. Blind jump into a combat zone with no beacon. The math has to be perfect or we come out inside a planet. Understood. Weapons, I want firing solutions ready the second we drop out of FTL. We don't have time for reconnaissance. We hit them with everything immediately. Ji-won's smile was cold. Already working on it, Captain. Prioritizing troop transports and landing craft. Cut off their ground forces first. Taemin pulled up the colony data on his personal display. Farms, schools, libraries. He saw images of Naveen families in their fields, children playing in gardens. People who had never hurt anyone, who just wanted to live quiet lives. Now they were hiding in shelters while soldiers hunted them. His hand tightened into a fist. Humanity had not been in space for long. Barely a century since they figured out faster than light travel. The older species looked at humans and saw aggressive newcomers who did not understand how the galaxy worked. Too violent, too quick to fight, too unwilling to follow proper diplomatic channels. Maybe they were right. Maybe humans were too aggressive. But Taemin had read the history books. He knew about the Galactic Council's careful procedures, their committees and authorization processes. He knew how long it took them to decide to act. By the time they finished debating whether to send help, entire civilizations could die. Captain, his communications officer called out. Message from Admiral Yuna. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired. Captain Taemin, I want you to understand something. What you're about to do is going to create political problems. The Kresh will protest to the Council. Other species will question whether we had the right to intervene without authorization. There will be consequences. I understand, Admiral. Good. Yuna's expression softened slightly. Now ignore all of that and go save those people. Show the galaxy what humans do when someone needs help. Yuna out. The screen went dark. Ji-won glanced at Taemin. She's right about the politics. We're going to make enemies today. We're also going to save lives. Taemin looked around his bridge. I don't care if the Kresh hate us. I don't care if the Council disapproves. Those colonists sent a distress call. Someone has to answer. 5 minutes to jump, engineering announced. The crew made final preparations. Weapons teams loaded the last missiles. Medical staff prepared for casualties. Damage control teams positioned themselves throughout the ship. Everyone knew their job. Everyone understood the risk. Taemin thought about his own path to this moment. He had not always been military. 20 years ago, he had been a merchant marine, running cargo between human colonies. Then pirates had attacked his convoy. They had sent distress signals. They had begged for help. No one came. 3 ships were destroyed before a patrol craft finally arrived, too late to do anything but count the bodies. Taemin had survived by hiding in an escape pod for 6 hours. When they pulled him out, he was suffering from oxygen deprivation and hypothermia. The rescuers asked him what he wanted to do. He said he wanted to join the military. He wanted to be the help that arrives in time. 1 minute to jump. The bridge lights dimmed. The ship's reactor pushed to maximum output, feeding energy into the faster-than-light drives. Taemin felt the familiar vibration through the deck plates. Around him, his crew gripped their stations. 30 seconds. Taemin opened the fleet-wide channel one more time. All hands, this is the captain. In a few seconds, we jump into hell. When we get there, I need everyone to do their job perfectly. No hesitation. No second guessing. We hit them hard and we hit them fast.
Remember why we're doing this.
Remember who we're protecting. 10 seconds. The vibration grew stronger. The lights flickered. 5 seconds. Taemin gripped the railing of his command platform. Jump. The universe twisted. For a fraction of a second that felt like forever, the defiant dawn existed in the space between spaces, in the darkness that connected the stars. Then reality snapped back with a force that threw everyone against their restraints. The main screen lit up with targets. 12 Kresh warships scattered around the planet. Landing craft descending toward the surface. Fighters swarming through the atmosphere. And directly ahead, less than 1,000 kilometers away, a Kresh heavy cruiser turning ponderously to face them. Weapons free, Taemin shouted.
Fire everything!
Ji-won's hands moved in a blur.
Firing!
The Defiant Dawn unleashed destruction. Railgun slugs, each one the size of a ground car, tore through space at a fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy was massive. When they hit the Kresh cruiser's shields, the barrier held for exactly 2 seconds before collapsing. The third slug punched completely through the ship's hull, followed by 4 more. The cruiser exploded in a ball of expanding gas and debris. Missiles followed the railgun barrage. Not the precise energy weapons that most species used. These were human weapons. Nuclear warheads wrapped in shaped charges designed to maximize damage. They spread out in a wave pattern, each one tracking a different target. A Kresh destroyer tried to evade. The missile followed it through 3 direction changes before detonating against its engines. The destroyer went dark and began tumbling out of control. The Kresh fleet scrambled to respond. Warning alarms blared across a dozen bridges. Commanders who had been relaxed, confident in their easy raid, suddenly faced a capital ship that had appeared from nowhere and was tearing through them. Evasive maneuvers, Taemin ordered. Don't let them get a firing solution on us. Keep moving. The Defiant Dawn dove toward the planet, its drives pushing beyond their rated capacity. Kresh fighters swarmed toward them. The ship's point defense systems activated, filling space with streams of high-velocity projectiles. Fighters exploded by the dozen, targeting landing craft, Ji-won announced. They're trying to evacuate their ground troops. Denied, Taemin said coldly. No one leaves that planet. More missiles launched. These were smaller, faster, designed for atmospheric work. They caught the landing craft as they struggled to climb out of the gravity well. One by one, the transports exploded, raining burning debris across the colony's farmland. On the surface, the Kresh soldiers stopped their advance. Their commanders were screaming contradictory orders. Retreat, hold position, find cover. The soldiers looked up at the sky where their fleet was dying and understood that something had gone terribly wrong. Captain, incoming transmission, the communications officer called out. It's the Kresh fleet commander. He wants to negotiate. Taemin's laugh was harsh. Put him on screen. A reptilian face appeared, its scales marked with battle scars and command insignia. The Kresh commander's eyes were wide with shock. Human vessel, cease fire immediately. This is a legitimate salvage operation authorized under... This is Captain Taemin of the human battleship Defiant Dawn. Taemin interrupted, his voice like ice. You have 30 seconds to order all your forces to withdraw. Every ship. Every soldier. 30 seconds or I turn your fleet into debris. You have no authority here. The Galactic Council, 20 seconds. The Kresh commander's face contorted with rage. You cannot threaten the Kresh Dominion. We will, 10 seconds. All weapons locked on your flagship. Your shields won't stop what I'm about to fire. For 5 seconds, the Kresh commander stared at Taemin. He saw no hesitation in the human's eyes, no bluff. Just cold certainty. All forces, the Kresh commander finally growled. Retreat. Full withdrawal. Ground forces, too, Taemin added. They surrender or they die. No third option. The screen went dark. Around the planet, the surviving Kresh ships began jumping to faster than light. The soldiers on the surface threw down their weapons. The battle was over. The Defiant Dawn had won. The underground shelter shook with distant explosions. Heron held the younglings close. Her body curved protectively over them as dust fell from the concrete ceiling. The battle had been raging overhead for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The sounds were unlike anything she had ever heard. Thunder without storms, lightning without clouds, then suddenly silence. The adults looked at each other with terrified eyes. Silence could mean many things. Maybe the Kresh had won and were now preparing to breach the shelters. Maybe everyone on the surface was already dead. Heron's breathing came in short gasps as she waited for the door to explode inward. A communication device crackled to life. Static, then a voice, speaking in perfect galactic standard with an accent Heron did not recognize. Attention all Talos 3 colonists. This is Captain Taemin of the human battleship Defiant Dawn. The Kresh fleet has been driven off. Their ground forces have surrendered. It is safe to come out of the shelters. No one moved. They stared at the device like it might bite them. Human? Someone whispered. The humans came? That's impossible, another said. The nearest human ships are days away. The voice continued calm and steady. I know you're frightened. I know you don't know if you can trust this message. I am sending my Marines down to help secure the Kresh prisoners. They will be wearing gray armor with blue markings. They are here to help. You are safe now. Hayren slowly released the younglings and stood on shaking legs. She made her way to the shelter door and pressed her ear against the metal. Outside she heard voices. Not the harsh Kresh language, but something else. Clearer, more organized. Teacher, don't! One of the adults hissed. It could be a trick. But Hayren was already opening the door. If this was death, at least it would be quick. She pushed the heavy metal aside and stepped out into the evening air. The colony was destroyed. Buildings burned. The teaching garden where she had been standing with the younglings was now a crater. Debris littered the streets. But the sky was clear. No Kresh ships. No fighters. Just smoke rising from wreckage and 3 moons hanging peacefully overhead. Soldiers were moving through the streets. Not Kresh. These were shorter, stockier figures in gray armor that covered them from head to foot. They moved with weapons ready but not threatening, checking buildings and rounding up the Kresh soldiers who had dropped their weapons. One of them spotted Hayren and approached. The armor made them look dangerous, but when they stopped 3 meters away and raised their hands peacefully, Hayren felt her fear ease slightly. The helmet retracted with a hiss, revealing a human face. A woman, her dark hair cut short, her eyes kind despite the weapon slung across her back. Ma'am, are there others in the shelter? The human asked in Galactic Standard. Hayren nodded, not trusting her voice. It's okay to bring them out. The area is secure. We have medical teams setting up near the community center. Anyone injured needs to get checked out. The human Marine smiled slightly. You're safe now. I promise. Other Naveen began emerging from shelters across the colony. They moved like people in a dream, unable to process what had happened. They had been certain they would die. They had said their goodbyes, made their peace. Now soldiers from a species they barely knew were walking through the ruins, treating their wounded, and offering them water. Hayren helped the younglings out of the shelter. They clung to her, their eyes huge as they watched the human Marines work. One of the younglings tugged on her sleeve. Teacher, are those the humans? The ones from the stories? What stories? Hayren asked. About the angry species. The ones who fight all the time. Hayren looked at the Marines organizing medical care, setting up temporary shelters, and distributing supplies from their ship. They moved with efficient purpose but not cruelty. I don't think those stories were correct, she said quietly. A shuttle descended from orbit, its engines kicking up dust as it landed in the colony square. The rear ramp lowered and more humans emerged. These were not wearing armor. They wore simpler uniforms marked with medical symbols. Behind them came a man in a different uniform, this one dark blue with insignia on the shoulders. He walked toward the gathering crowd of Naveen colonists. He was not particularly tall, maybe average height for his species, but he carried himself with quiet authority. His eyes swept across the damage, and Hayren saw his jaw tighten with what looked like anger. When he reached the colonists, he stopped and spoke clearly. I am Captain Taemin. My ship responded to your distress call. I apologize that we could not arrive sooner. I apologize for the damage to your colony. We tried to keep the fighting in orbit, but some of the Kresh vessels crashed when they were destroyed. One of the colony elders stepped forward. His voice shook. You saved us. We thought no one was coming. We thought we were going to die. Taemin's expression softened. We heard your call. We came as fast as we could, but why? Another colonist asked. Why would humans risk their ship for us? We barely know each other. We have no alliance. No treaty. Why? Taemin was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his words were simple. Because you needed help. Because it was the right thing to do. We don't need a treaty to protect innocent people. Hayren found herself moving forward through the crowd. She did not plan it. Her legs just carried her. She stopped in front of the human captain and looked up at him. Thank you, she said, and her voice broke on the words. Thank you for coming. Thank you for saving the children. Taemin looked at her and she saw something in his eyes. Not pity. Understanding. Like he knew exactly what she had felt in that shelter. What's your name? He asked. Hayren. I'm a teacher. Teacher Hayren, can you help me? I need to know how many people are hurt. How many we lost. Where people need the most help. Hayrin straightened. She was still shaking, still processing the fact that she was alive, but she had a task now, something to focus on. Yes, I can do that. Over the next hour, the colony slowly came back to life. Humans worked alongside Naveen to put out fires, search for survivors, and set up temporary shelters. Medical teams treated the wounded. The Kresh prisoners were loaded onto shuttles and taken up to the human ship for holding. Hayrin watched it all with growing wonder. The humans worked tirelessly. They shared their food without being asked. When they found a Naveen child trapped under rubble, 6 Marines dug with their bare hands to free her. They did not act like conquerors or like people expecting gratitude. They just worked. Governor Sang-ho arrived on the second shuttle, bringing supplies and communication equipment. He set up a temporary command center and began coordinating with the Naveen homeworld. The news was spreading fast. A human ship had engaged a Kresh raiding fleet and won. As night fell, emergency lights illuminated the colony square. Captain Taemin stood with Hayrin and the colony elders reviewing damage reports. The numbers were grim. 30 buildings completely destroyed, 47 colonists dead, caught in the initial bombardment before they could reach shelters, over 100 injured, but it could have been so much worse. If the Kresh had completed their raid, every single Naveen on Talos 3 would have been taken as slaves or killed. 2,000 lives saved because one ship decided to answer a distress call. Captain, one of the elders said hesitantly, what happens now? The Kresh will seek revenge. They do not forgive humiliation. Taemin's expression was hard. Let them try. Any Kresh ship that comes near this colony will face the same fate as the ones today. And I'm recommending that Fleet Command station a permanent patrol in this sector. You won't be alone anymore. Another elder shook her head in disbelief. I don't understand. The Galactic Council has procedures for this kind of situation. Committees, authorization processes. They need weeks to decide on military action. How did you just decide to come? We saw people in danger, Taemin said simply. We had the ability to help, so we helped. Everything else is just bureaucracy. But the political consequences are not your problem. Taemin's voice was firm, but not unkind. Let the politicians argue. Let the council debate whether we had the right to intervene. While they're talking, you're alive. Your children are alive. That's what matters. Hayrin looked at this human captain, this man who had brought his ship into impossible odds because it was the right thing to do. She thought about all the stories her people told about humans. Aggressive, violent, dangerous, quick to anger, and quicker to fight. Maybe those stories were true, but maybe violence had a purpose. Maybe the capacity for aggression, when pointed in the right direction, could protect instead of destroy. Maybe the galaxy needed species who would act instead of debate. Captain Taemin, she said quietly, will you teach us? He looked at her with surprise. Teach you what? How to protect ourselves. How to fight. How to be strong enough that we never have to hide in shelters again, praying for someone to save us. Taemin studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Yes, I think we can arrange that. The galaxy is more dangerous than your people realized. It's time you learned how to survive in it. Above them, the Defiant Dawn hung in orbit, its hull scarred from battle but intact. Its weapons were still charged, its crew still alert. A guardian standing watch over a world that had learned a hard lesson about the nature of the universe. Help had come, against all odds, against all expectations. The Galactic Council chamber had not seen this much activity in decades. Representatives from 60 species filled the vast circular hall, their voices rising in argument. Holographic displays showed the battle at Talos 3 from multiple angles. The footage was clear. One human battleship against a Kresh raiding fleet. The violence of human weapons. The complete destruction of several Kresh vessels. The counselor from the Kresh Dominion stood at his podium, his scales flushed, dark with rage. This is an act of unprovoked aggression. The humans attacked a legitimate Kresh operation without authorization from this council, without even attempting diplomatic contact. They simply appeared and began destroying our ships. Ambassador Yuna stood at the human delegation's podium, her expression calm. The counselor describes a slaving raid as a legitimate operation. Perhaps he could explain what legitimate means in the Kresh language, because in human terms, attacking peaceful colonists is called an atrocity. The council has specific procedures for intervention. Another representative shouted, procedures that exist for good reason. You cannot simply decide which laws to follow. Your procedures take weeks, Una replied coldly. The colony had hours. By the time your committees finished debating, 2,000 innocent people would have been dead or enslaved. Tell me, which is worse, breaking procedure or letting people die while you follow it? The council chamber erupted in argument. Some species supported the human intervention. Others were horrified by the violation of protocol. The elder species, those who had been part of the galactic community for thousands of years, were particularly upset. Their entire civilization was built on rules, procedures, and careful deliberation. Humans had been in space for barely a century, and they were already ignoring the established order. On Talos 3rd, reconstruction continued. Human cargo ships arrived daily, bringing building materials, food, medical supplies, and prefabricated housing. Governor Sang-ho coordinated the relief effort with quiet efficiency. He had set up a permanent office in the colony, transforming the human trading post into a full diplomatic mission. Hyrin worked alongside the reconstruction teams. She had become an unofficial liaison between the Naveen colonists and their human helpers. Every day brought new surprises. The humans worked with an intensity that amazed her. They did not just repair buildings. They improved them, added stronger foundations, better materials, systems designed to withstand orbital bombardment. You're building a fortress, she said to one of the construction supervisors. The human woman nodded. We're building something that can survive. If someone attacks again, these structures will protect your people while help arrives. We're also installing a proper defense grid. Nothing fancy, but enough to make raiders think twice. Won't that anger the Kresh even more? Let them be angry. Better they fear you than think you're easy prey. 3 weeks after the battle, a Naveen military ship arrived in orbit. Admiral Bom-suk came down to the surface with a full honor guard. He was an older Naveen, his fur graying at the edges, wearing a uniform that seemed uncomfortable on his peaceful frame. He met with Captain Taemin in the reconstructed community center. Captain, on behalf of the Naveen Confederation, I bring our deepest gratitude, Bom-suk said formally. You saved our people when no one else could. We are in your debt, Taemin shook his head. No debt. We did what anyone should do. But you are not anyone. You are human. Your reputation in the galaxy is complicated. Many species fear you. They say you are too aggressive, too quick to violence. After seeing what you did to the Kresh fleet, I understand their fear. But I also understand something else. Bom-suk paused. I understand that sometimes the galaxy needs someone willing to be violent in defense of peace. What will your people do now? Taemin asked. Build a real military. For 10,000 years we have been peaceful. We thought that made us civilized. We thought violence was beneath us. We were fools. Bom-suk's voice hardened. The Kresh have raided our colonies for decades. We always filed protests with the council, went through proper channels. Nothing ever changed. Now we know why. The council cannot protect us. They are too slow, too cautious, too bound by their own rules. And you think weapons will solve that? I think weapons in the right hands prevent tragedies. I think a species that can defend itself does not have to pray for rescue. I think we need to be more like you, Captain. Strong enough to protect ourselves, brave enough to protect others. Taemin looked out the window at the rebuilt colony. Strength is necessary. But be careful. It's easy to become what you fight against. Use your strength wisely. Hayrin listened to this conversation from the doorway. Over the past weeks, she had spent hours talking with human soldiers, engineers, and diplomats. She had learned about Earth, about human history, the wars they had fought among themselves, the horrors they had survived, the lessons they had learned. Humans understood violence because they had lived through it. They knew both sides of it, the destruction it caused and the protection it could provide. That knowledge made them dangerous, but it also made them valuable. After the Admiral left, Hyrin approached Taemin. Your ship is leaving soon, isn't it? Tomorrow morning. We've been called back to Fleet Command. There are other patrols that need running, other emergencies that might arise. He smiled slightly. Don't worry. Another human ship is already en route to take over security duties. You won't be alone. That's not what worries me. Hayrin hesitated. What worries me is what happens when you're not around. What happens to the next colony that gets attacked? Will humans always come? Can you protect the entire galaxy? No, Taemin admitted. We're one species. We have our own worlds to protect, our own problems to solve. We can't be everywhere. That's why other species need to learn to protect themselves, need to find their own strength. Is that why you agreed to train our people? To send military advisors? Partly. But also because I've seen what happens when good people have no way to defend themselves. I've seen the aftermath. I don't want to see it again. That evening, the colony held a gathering in honor of the human crew. It was not a formal ceremony. The Naveen were not warriors and did not have military traditions. Instead, they did what they knew. They shared food, told stories, and sang songs of gratitude. The human crew seemed uncomfortable with the attention at first. They had just done their job, they insisted. Nothing special. But as the evening went on and the Naveen children presented them with handmade gifts, with drawings and carved wooden tokens, Aaron saw some of the soldiers wipe their eyes. One young Marine sat surrounded by Naveen younglings, answering their questions about Earth and human ships. The younglings were fascinated by stories of oceans and mountains, of cities that reached toward the sky. The Marine spoke gently, translating the violent reality of her job into something the children could understand. She was a protector, a guardian, someone who made sure families could sleep safely at night. Commander Jiwan found Hayren watching the celebration. "Your people are kind," she said. "I hope kindness survives what's coming." "What do you mean?" "The galaxy is changing. What happened here will echo. Other peaceful species will realize they need to arm themselves. Other predatory species will think twice before attacking. The balance of power is shifting. I just hope in trying to become strong, your people don't lose what makes them worth protecting." Hayren considered this. "You think strength corrupts?" "It can. I've seen it happen. But I've also seen strength used nobly. It depends on the people wielding it." Jiwan looked at the celebrating crowd. "Your people have something special. Hold on to it even as you learn to fight." The next morning, the Defiant Dawn prepared to depart. Captain Taman stood in the colony square one last time, shaking hands with the elders and saying goodbye to the colonists who had come to see him off. Hayren gave him a gift. A small carved stone from the teaching garden, polished smooth. "So you remember us," she said. Taman accepted it with genuine appreciation. "I won't forget. None of us will. Take care of your people, Teacher Hayren. Make them strong, but keep them good." "I'll try. That's all any of us can do." The shuttle lifted off, carrying Taman and his crew back to their ship. Hayren watched it go, her hand shading her eyes against the sun. Around her, other colonists waved. The Defiant Dawn hung in orbit for another hour, completing final checks and transferring the last of the Kresh prisoners to a Galactic Council ship that had finally arrived. Then the human battleship engaged its drives and jumped to faster than light, leaving behind a colony that would never be the same. That night, Hayren stood in the rebuilt teaching garden with her students. They looked up at the stars together, but now the younglings saw them differently. The universe was no longer just a place of beauty and wonder. It was also dangerous, full of threats and challenges. But it was also full of friends, species who would come when called, who would risk everything to protect the innocent, who proved that strength and compassion could exist together. "Teacher," one of the younglings asked, "will we ever be like the humans? Strong enough to protect others?" Hayren thought about Captain Taman, about his ship roaring out of the void to save people he had never met. She thought about the choice he made to risk his crew for strangers. 6 months after the battle at Talos III, the galaxy looked different. Not physically. The stars still hung in their ancient patterns. The trade routes still connected thousands of worlds, and the Galactic Council still met in their grand chamber to debate policy. But something fundamental had shifted in the way species viewed each other and themselves. Captain Taman stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Guardian's Promise. It was larger than the Defiant Dawn, built specifically for rapid response missions. Around it flew 3 other human battleships, forming the core of what Fleet Command now called the Guardian Fleet. Ships designed to answer distress calls, to protect the unprotected, to be the help that arrives in time. "Captain, we have an incoming emergency transmission," Lieutenant Day reported from the communication station. "It's from the Pelkari settlement in the Outer Reach sector. They're under attack by unknown raiders." "Distance?" Taman asked. 6 systems. "We can be there in 40 minutes. Taman looked at Commander Jiwan, who had transferred with him to the new ship. She was already pulling up tactical data, her fingers moving across her displays. The Pelkari are another peaceful species. No military to speak of. This is probably another slaving raid. Then we go, Taman said simply. He activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships prepare for emergency jump. We have people who need help. Let's not keep them waiting. The 4 human battleships turned as one and jumped to faster than light, leaving behind the patrol route they had been following. No request for authorization, no debate, just action. This had become standard procedure for human ships. When a distress call came in, they responded. The Galactic Council had complained, filed protests, demanded that humans follow proper channels. Admiral Yuna had replied with a simple statement. Humans would follow council procedures for political disputes, but they would not wait for committee approval when lives were at stake. The elder species could complain all they wanted. The humans kept saving people. On Earth, in the Fleet Command headquarters, Admiral Yuna reviewed reports from across human space. The Guardian fleet was operating at full capacity, responding to an average of 3 emergencies per week. Other nations were beginning to build similar ships impressed by human willingness to protect peaceful worlds. But there were costs. 2 human ships had been lost in the past 6 months. The destroyer Swift Mercy had been destroyed defending a colony from pirates. The frigate Faithful Watch had sacrificed itself to cover the evacuation of a research station under attack. 37 human crew members dead. The number weighed on Yuna like stones. Was it worth it? Were these the lives of strangers worth more than the lives of her own people? She thought about the reports from those rescued colonies. The thousands of civilians who were alive because a human ship had arrived. The children who still had parents. The families who remained whole. She thought about the messages of gratitude that came daily from dozens of species. Yes, it was worth it. This was what humanity had chosen to be. Not conquerors, not isolationists, protectors. Sometimes that meant sacrifice. Sometimes that meant paying a price in blood. But the alternative was to stand by while innocent people died. And humanity had decided long ago that was not acceptable. On Talos III, the colony had been completely rebuilt. Harian walked through streets that now housed defensive turrets hidden in decorative towers. The buildings looked peaceful, but were reinforced to military standards. Underground shelters had been expanded and stocked with supplies to last months. More importantly, the colonists themselves had changed. Harian now spent half her time teaching traditional subjects and half teaching basic security and emergency procedures. The younglings learned to read and also learned what to do if raiders appeared again. It was not the childhood their species had known for thousands of years, but it was the childhood that the real galaxy required. A group of Naveen volunteers trained with human military advisors in a field outside the colony. They would never be elite soldiers. Their bodies and their culture were not built for warfare, but they could learn to operate defensive systems. They could coordinate evacuations. They could buy time for help to arrive. That was the key lesson Harian had learned. You did not need to be able to win every fight. You just needed to be strong enough to survive until your friends showed up, and humanity had proven they would show up. The training instructor, a human woman named Lieutenant Kyung, approached Harian as the day's exercises ended. Your people are doing well, she said. They're learning fast. Another few months and this colony will be able to hold off a small raiding party on its own. Will that be enough? Harian asked. Probably not. But it doesn't have to be. There's a human patrol ship checking this sector every week now. If you get attacked again, help will arrive in less than an hour. The raiders know this. That's why they're not coming back. It was true. In the 6 months since the Defiant Dawn had destroyed the Kresh fleet, no one had touched Talos III. Other colonies in the region, those without human protection, had been raided twice. The message was clear. Attack a human-protected world and face consequences. Some species called this imperialism. The humans were building an empire through protection agreements, they said, taking control without calling it control. But Harian did not care what they called it. She cared that the younglings in her garden could play without fear. She cared that families slept peacefully at night. She cared that help would come if needed. In the Kresh Dominion, the aftermath of the Talos III disaster continued to echo. The military leaders who had authorized the raid had been executed. The Dominion had pulled back from the frontier regions, consolidating their forces closer to home. They still conducted raids, but they were careful now. They checked for human ships before attacking. They avoided any target that might bring human attention. Fear had come to the predators of the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, species that had grown fat on slaving and raiding faced a power that hit back hard and fast. The Kresh were not the only ones. Pirates found their usual hunting grounds patrolled by human warships. Slavers discovered that colonies they once considered easy prey now had defensive systems and rapid response agreements. The balance was shifting. The elder species watched with mixed feelings. Some were grateful that the violent raids had decreased. Others worried about human influence growing too strong. Debates raged in the council chambers about how to respond to this new reality. But in the frontier colonies, in the peaceful settlements far from the galactic core, the people had no doubts. They knew exactly who to call when trouble came. They knew who would answer. Governor Sang-Ho had built his trading post into a thriving diplomatic center. Representatives from 24 species came here to negotiate protection agreements with humanity. The process was simple. In exchange for human military protection, the colony would grant humans trading rights and cooperation on shared interests. No demands for submission, no loss of sovereignty, just mutual benefit and friendship. It was working. Humanity's sphere of influence expanded not through conquest but through protection. Species allied with humans because they wanted to, because it kept them safe, because humans treated them with respect. Sang-Ho often thought about the night the Kresh had attacked, how close Talos III had come to destruction, how one decision, one captain choosing to risk everything, had changed the course of galactic politics. Taman probably did not realize the full scope of what he had started. He had just wanted to save people. Sometimes the most important moments came from the simplest choices. On the Guardian's promise, Captain Taman and his fleet dropped out of faster than light above the Pelkari settlement. They found what they expected. A raider fleet attacking an undefended colony. This time it was not the Kresh but a different group. Opportunistic pirates looking for easy prey. The pirates took one look at the 4 human battleships and fled. They did not even try to fight. They knew what human ships could do. They had heard the stories. Some of them probably had friends who had died at Talos III or in other engagements since then. The Pelkari colonists emerged from their shelters to find the raiders gone and human ships in orbit. They sent messages of frantic gratitude. They had called for help, not expecting anyone to come. The council forces were weeks away. Local defense contractors wanted huge sums to respond. They had been preparing to die. Then humans appeared, drove off the raiders, and asked for nothing in return except friendship. It was becoming a pattern. A familiar story repeated across the frontier. People in danger. A distress call sent into the void. A human ship arriving before hope died. Tears of relief. Gratitude that could not be properly expressed. Taman went through the routine. Secure the system. Check for casualties. Offer medical assistance. Leave emergency supplies. Coordinate with local authorities. Promise that patrols would check the area regularly. Then depart. Already listening for the next call. Commander G1 found him in his ready room that evening reviewing casualty reports. This time there had been no human losses. The pirates had fled too quickly. But Taman was thinking about the Swift Mercy, about the crew members who had died defending strangers. You're thinking about them again, G1 said quietly. Always. Every time we jump into a situation,